On March 24, 2015, a commercial flight took off from Barcelona, Spain. It was headed for Düsseldorf, Germany, a short, routine trip across Europe. On board were 150 souls, 144 passengers and 6 crew members. Mothers, fathers, students, teachers, all going about their lives. Nothing seemed unusual. No emergency alerts. No distress calls. No hijackers. But this flight would never make it to its destination. Instead, it would plummet into the side of a mountain, in full speed in full daylight, killing everyone on board instantly. What makes this tragedy even more horrifying is the reason behind it. This was not a malfunction. This was not terrorism. It wasn't even an accident. It was a deliberate act, carried out by someone who should have never been in the cockpit to begin with. Footage of airports, boarding passengers, aircraft on tarmac. Germanwings Flight 9525 was operated by a low-cost subsidiary of Lufthansa, Germany's national airline. The aircraft, an Airbus A320, had flown safely for over 24 years and had passed all necessary maintenance checks. It departed El Prat Airport in Barcelona at exactly 10:01 a.m. local time. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer was in charge, a respected veteran with over 6,000 flight hours. Next to him sat First Officer Andreas Lubitz, just 27 years old, quiet, ambitious, with a spotless official record. But what the airline didn't know was that Lubitz was hiding something that would change the course of aviation history. Archive footage and photos of Lubitz, flight plan animation from Barcelona to Düsseldorf, and cockpit interior visuals. Unknown to Germanwings and to his colleagues, Lubitz had a long history of severe mental health issues. He had been diagnosed with depression, had experienced suicidal ideation, and had taken breaks from flight training to undergo psychiatric care. In fact, several doctors had deemed him unfit to fly. Yet somehow, Lubitz slipped through the cracks. Still certified. Still flying. Still trusted with hundreds of lives. 3. The incident. Tension begins to rise. Show animated flight timeline, radar tracking, and cockpit graphics. The flight proceeded normally for the first 26 minutes. The aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet while flying over the south of France. At 10:27 a.m., Captain Sondenheimer stepped out of the cockpit to use the restroom, a routine break that should have posed no risk. But in that brief moment, First Officer Andreas Lubitz took control and made his move. Cockpit reenactment. Captain, you have the controls. Lubitz, Roger. As soon as the door shut behind the captain, Lubitz activated the cockpit door security lock, a system reinforced after September 11 to prevent hijackings. From inside, he set the autopilot to descend, not by a few thousand feet, but all the way down to 100 feet above sea level. Digital map showing aircraft's slow descent pattern. The descent was gradual at first, not enough to raise immediate alarms. But soon it became clear something was wrong. Air traffic control attempted contact, no response. Over the next 8 minutes, Flight 9525 continued its silent, steady plunge toward the mountains. Cockpit simulation. Inside the cabin, passengers began to panic. Some screamed. Others tried to send final texts or voicemails to loved ones. Mobile phones recorded their final moments. But in the cockpit, Lubitz remained silent, focused, determined. Then a low rumble, followed by the chilling sound of impact. At exactly 10:41 a.m., the Airbus slammed into a mountain in the French Alps at a speed of over 800 kilometers per hour. The impact obliterated the plane. There were no survivors. 4. Technical breakdown. Recovery teams reached the crash site within hours. The wreckage was scattered across steep alpine cliffs. But the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were eventually recovered, giving investigators the answers they dreaded. The audio confirmed the sequence. Lubitz waited until he was alone. He locked the captain out. He ignored calls from air traffic control. He ignored Sondenheimer's desperate attempts to break through the reinforced door. Visual explanation. Airbus Cockpit Security Lock System Post 9/11. Ironically, the very system designed to protect the cockpit from terrorists kept the captain out, and gave Lubitz complete control. Medical records and psychiatric evaluations on screen. Medical files later revealed Lubitz had been battling major depressive disorder. He also reported experiencing visual disturbances, seeing flashing lights and fearing blindness. He had even told his doctor that he had thoughts of suicide. But here's the flaw: aviation authorities largely relied on self-reporting. Lubitz did not tell his employer. He concealed notes from doctors. And under Germany's strict privacy laws, his physicians could not legally alert the airline without his consent. The victims came from 18 different countries. Among them, 16 German schoolchildren and their teachers, returning from a language exchange in Spain. 5. Impact and aftermath. The crash of Germanwings Flight 9525 claimed the lives of all 150 people on board. It wasn't just a number. These were human lives, individuals with dreams, careers, families, and futures. Among the victims were 16 German high school students and 2 of their teachers from the town of Haltern am See. They had been on a student exchange trip to Spain, a cultural journey meant to broaden their horizons. None of them returned. Also lost were parents traveling for work, newlyweds returning from vacation, opera singers, engineers, and entire families flying home together. In one instant, generations were wiped out. For many of the grieving relatives, reaching the crash site was its own ordeal. The wreckage lay on a steep, remote slope in the French Alps, accessible only by helicopter or grueling hikes. Some families chose to make the journey. Others watched memorial services from afar, unable to bear the climb or the emotional weight. The sorrow stretched across Europe, from Spain to Germany, from Italy to Turkey. In airports, churches, and schools, flags were lowered. Moments of silence were held. And entire towns fell quiet in mourning. Two-person cockpit rule. In the wake of the tragedy, aviation authorities in many countries implemented a mandatory rule: no pilot can be left alone in the cockpit. If one steps out, a flight attendant must step in until they return. Mandatory medical reporting. Some nations updated confidentiality laws, giving doctors limited authority to report pilots who pose a public safety risk, even without patient consent. Mental health reform in aviation. Airlines began requiring more frequent and robust mental health screenings for pilots, along with confidential support services and peer reporting channels to flag concerns early. Before this crash, mental health was often treated as a private matter, one that pilots were expected to manage alone. But this tragedy changed that. It forced the aviation industry to confront an uncomfortable reality: a pilot's mental state is not just a personal issue, it can become a catastrophic safety threat. And it revealed a paradox in aviation security: that the reinforced cockpit doors, installed after September 11 to keep hijackers out, could also keep help out. The very tools meant to save lives were used to end them. In aviation, every safety system is designed with precision, with backup after backup. But the human element remains the weakest link. Because even the most advanced machine cannot override a silent mind determined to self-destruct. 6. Reflection and legacy. Germanwings Flight 9525 is not just a tragedy written in aviation history, it is a mirror held up to the modern world. A reminder that even in the age of autopilot systems, AI diagnostics, and triple-check checklists, the most complex and unpredictable component of any aircraft remains the human being behind the controls. It reminds us that pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it hides behind a calm voice, a professional uniform, and a polite smile. Pilots greeting passengers, smiling during boarding, walking through airports, juxtaposed with quiet close-ups of eyes, isolated cockpit shots. Andreas Lubitz passed through security. He passed health screenings. He passed simulator training. But he didn't pass the internal battle that no one else could see, not colleagues, not doctors, not even those closest to him. That's what makes this story so chilling. Because what crashed that day was not a plane malfunctioning, it was a man unraveling silently until it was too late. Candlelight vigils in Spain and Germany, names projected on a wall, mourners standing quietly in snow. March 24, 2015, the day the unthinkable became reality. One person, drowning in his own despair, took control of an aircraft and made a decision that would end 149 innocent lives. Lives that had nothing to do with his pain. Lives that trusted him. But in that horror, came reckoning. The crash ignited not only aviation reforms, but global conversations about mental health, especially in high-responsibility professions. Suddenly, airlines, governments, and even schools began asking deeper questions. Are we listening? Are we checking in with those who appear okay on the outside? Flight 9525 left a scar on aviation, but also a lesson for all of us. That true safety doesn't begin with stronger doors or stricter rules. It begins with compassion, vigilance, and the courage to confront what's invisible. Because no system, no cockpit, and no policy is immune to the silent weight of a mind in crisis. Outro. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more real-life aviation stories. Do you think this tragedy could have been prevented? Tell us what you think in the comments.